talk again about what is the purpose of the church, and this purpose this week is going to be being prepared. Remember, we talked about worship as a purpose, and fellowship and outreach, and so this week we're talking about looking out, watching, waiting, being ready. So what does it mean to be prepared? Well, different people have different ideas. Me and Bree have pretty drastically different ideas of what it means to be prepared. Bree thinks being prepared is having a few extra cans of food in the cabinet. That may be realistic, sure. I think being prepared is having 10 gallons of fresh water and about 3 months of non-perishable food stored in the basement. Now, she may be more realistic, but if that nuclear apocalypse ever happens, she's going to wish she'd listened to me. I like to look worst case scenario. But we're told that as a church, as followers of Christ, we should be watching, we should be looking out, we should be prepared for the coming of Christ. We know that Jesus is going to return one day. In Acts 1, verse 10, right after Jesus ascends into heaven, it says, "They were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood beside them. 'Men of Galilee,' they said, 'why do you stand here looking into the sky? The same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven.'" We know that Christ is going to return, so now it is the duty of Christians and of the church to be prepared, to look forward to that return and to plan for it. Now, I want to talk about the significance of that. I said every week we want to mention a purpose of the church, and we want to mention the significance of that purpose. Well, there's a couple when it comes to being prepared. First of all, just practically speaking, it's something that's going to happen, so we might as well be ready for it. Second of all, when we all are prepared together, looking to one event, focusing on one time, when we're all doing that together, it helps bring us together and we become stronger, and we are able to serve God better in the process. But the thing I want to see today in Luke chapter 12 is that the church should constantly prepare itself for the return of Christ. We should be constantly preparing ourselves for the return of Christ. And I want to look at 3 reasons why we should be preparing ourselves. So in Luke 12, we're going to start in verse 35. First reason that we should prepare ourselves. In Luke 12, verse 35. Jesus is speaking in a parable to the people that are there listening to him, and he says, "Be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like men waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him." Okay, so first reason that we should be prepared is because the person we're watching for is, in fact, our master. It's because someone greater than us is coming. That's why we should be prepared. We are like the servants waiting on a master to return. Now, in this time, if you were a servant, it wasn't quite the same as having a boss today. Here you have a boss and you may not like him, you may just deal with him, you may get fed up and quit. But in this time, your master was pretty much your livelihood. Now, that's exactly who Christ is. He is our master. In Colossians 1, verse 15, Paul describes Christ as this. He said, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things were created by him and for him. He is the beginning, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy." See, Christ is sovereign. Christ has dominion over the world. He is, in every sense of the word, our master. That makes waiting for him, preparing for him, pretty important. You see, we're not waiting on our wife to get ready. We're not waiting on our school bus to pick us up. We're not waiting on our waiter to bring us food. We are waiting on our master. So that's a good reason to be prepared. I know all about waiting on a master. I used to work for a heating and air department when I was in college, the heating and air. And we were drastically, pathetically, miserably overemployed. We had probably 5 or 6 guys on staff. We needed maybe 2. So we were always overemployed, so we were always doing busy work. And our busy work included, most of the time, going to mechanical closets around campus, the closets where you have the air conditioners and where you do all the maintenance of that. We'd go into those closets and we would paint the walls or sweep it out, something that really didn't matter in a little hole in the wall somewhere that no one's going to go into. So we did a lot of busy work doing that. But our boss was always very busy, so all the time he would always tell us, "All right, Nathan, you take Caleb, and I want you to go to this mechanical closet and wait for me, and I'll come and tell you what you're going to do. I got to go talk to my boss first, so I'll be there eventually." and we would go and wait. Sometimes we'd wait 3 minutes. Sometimes we would wait what felt like a half hour or an hour. And I cannot tell you how bad I wanted to go to sleep while I was waiting on him to get there. He took his time, and I was just exhausted the whole time, always wanting to fall asleep. The only thing that kept me awake was because I knew that my boss was going to come, and if he walked in and found me asleep, I'd be in a lot of trouble. We are waiting on our master. We're waiting on our boss, if you will. So since we're waiting on our master, it's very important. So make sure that you are ready for his return. Now, I think a lot of people would generically say that they're ready, but I don't know that everyone really knows for sure if they are ready. Just because we think we're ready doesn't necessarily mean we are. Peter thought that he was ready. In Luke 22:33, he told Jesus, "Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death." But it was that very same night that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. So are we really ready? To answer that question, that's something you have to ask yourself. That's not something anyone else can tell you. No one knows my heart except me and God. And sometimes I have to do some serious thinking to even figure it out for myself. Whether or not we're prepared for Christ's return is a question we have to answer on an individual basis. So I don't say this to challenge you. I don't say this to congratulate you for being ready. I don't say this to reprimand you because you're not ready enough. I say this simply so that you can know. Ask yourself, am I ready for the return of my master? So that's why we are prepared. We prepare constantly for the return of Christ because, one, he is our master. Let's look at the second reason. In Luke 5, verse 37, Jesus continues his parable. He says, "It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. I tell you the truth, he will dress himself to serve, will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them." Second reason that we should be prepared for the coming of our master is preparation is rewarded. Preparation is rewarded. Now, if we're watching for him and we're ready, then we're rewarded. Now, in this story that Jesus is telling, the master is on his way back from a wedding banquet. Now, you think weddings are big deals in our time. Today, they were huge back then. Sometimes a wedding might even last as long as a week. And so a master's been gone to a wedding banquet, and he's on his way back, and he's saying that, Jesus is saying his servants should be ready so that they can open the door as soon as he gets there and knock. Have you guys ever gone home or gone to a place, and when you start to get there, before you even get inside or get up to the door, someone opens the door because they're watching for you and they're waiting for you to come in? That makes you feel good. Sometimes when I'm out visiting, I come back home and I'll stop by the house before I come back over to church. And as soon as I get out of the car, before I can get to the front door at the house, Bree will sometimes open the door for me just to let me come in. That makes me feel good because that makes me know that she was waiting. Somebody actually wants me there. Well, we should be waiting. We should be prepared for the coming of our master. Now, in case you're noticing here, now Christ says that if the master finds his servants waiting, then he's going to come in and he's going to sit them down at the table and he's going to serve them. He's going to wait on them. Now, in case you hadn't noticed, that doesn't make any sense. Why would a master wait on his servants? Why would a master take care of his servants and serve them? Well, thankfully, we have a master who rewards us for our service. And when Jesus returns, if he finds us prepared, our reward is heaven with him. But there's another side to this. In Matthew 25, verse 10, Jesus tells another analogy about a wedding banquet. And he talks about 10 virgins who are waiting for the bridegroom to come so they can go to the wedding banquet. And they're waiting, and only half of them brought enough oil for their lamps. And so they're waiting, and it says in verse 10 that they had to go and buy oil. It says, while they were on their way to buy oil, the ones that didn't bring enough, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others also came. Sir, they said, open the door for us. But he replied, I tell you the truth, I don't know you. Now that's kind of scary, because if we're ready, we're rewarded. If we're not ready, we're excluded. Now that's a sad thing to think about, but it comes down to only 2 options. You're either ready or you're not. You know, in the late 18th century, there was a representative in the Connecticut House of Representatives, a speaker named Colonel Davenport. Now, Colonel Davenport was the speaker of that house, and one day in 1780, they were sitting around in their House of Representatives building, wherever it is they meet, and they're sitting and they were doing their business, taking care of things, when all of a sudden, for some reason, I assume a storm or something, but instantly outside it just became pitch black. A storm came in incredibly fast, the sky just turned dark, they would have to have candles to even be able to see anything anymore, And for some reason, I think people jumped to conclusions there. Some people jumped up and said, it's the coming of Christ. Jesus is returning, and people started jumping around and panicking, and they started calling to adjourn the meeting. And the Speaker of the House, Colonel Davenport, he stood up and he said, tell you what, this is the way it is. Either Christ is coming now or he's not. If he's not coming, there's no point in us adjourning the meeting. If he is coming, then I would rather him find me at work doing my job. So let us bring out candles so that we can keep working. Here's the thing, Christ is going to come, and when he comes, if we're prepared, we are rewarded. Now, we can be prepared individually, how I live as a Christian, whether I'm trying to serve God, but we should be prepared as a church as well. Revelation 19:7 says, let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. The bride of Christ is the church, and it says the church, this is the universal church as a whole, has made herself ready. She was prepared for him to come. But how do we prepare as a church? A group of followers of Christ, how can we collectively prepare for his return? Well, what is our purpose? We've already said that worship is our purpose. We've said that fellowship and strengthen each other, that's our purpose. We've said that outreach, bringing other people into Christ so that when he comes they can be ready as well, that's our purpose. Accomplishing those purposes, that's what makes us ready. Now, on a side note, I have to say something about, I talked a couple weeks ago about fellowship, and I have to bring up something about that. This past week, I was meeting with a lady from our church who's in the nursing home who can't come to be with us anymore. And I was talking with her, and apparently some people from the church here had been going to see her and been going to visit her and been talking to her. And she told me this week while I was sitting there visiting with her, she said, even though I'm in this nursing home and I can't get up there to church, because of the people that have been coming, I still feel like I'm a part of that church up there at Fairlawn. Now that is exactly the kind of thing that our fellowship should be producing. That's exactly it. That was perfect. But we know that we have these purposes that we're supposed to accomplish, and accomplishing those purposes as a church is going to make us ready. But here's the thing I want everyone in here to know. I want us all to understand something very important. We've been talking about these purposes, but really they're all one purpose. One is not more important than the other. You see churches all the time, maybe huge mega churches that just bring in people just by dozens at a time. They're growing, but no one really knows each other. And there's not really any fellowship, so they miss out on a lot of the strengthening that they would have. Now that church fails in its mission. Or sometimes you see churches that have a good, strong fellowship program. People are close, they love each other, they're friends, but they don't really ever reach out. They never bring more people in, never tell people about the gospel of Christ. That church fails in its mission. Or sometimes you see churches that have that close-knit fellowship, and maybe they're growing and more people are coming in, but they don't really have an emphasis on worship. And they don't get together to worship God. They just get together to have fun and be together. They're just a social club at that point. And that church fails in its purpose. If we fail to accomplish one purpose, we fail overall. So my question for you is our church failing in one of our purposes? Do we fail somewhere? Now, if no, that's great. We need to keep doing like we are. If we are failing, we need to know about it and we need to fix it. So are we failing? And if we are, how can we fix it? Now, I told you a question before, are you ready for Christ? That was for personal reflection. That was for you alone. But as for our church, this is not for you alone. This is for the entire church family. Don't just quietly reflect on this. This is something that we all need to work together towards, being prepared for the coming of Christ. So think about it. What do we need to be better at? Talk with each other. How can we fix that? Figure it out. This is something that we face as a church together.